안녕. Welcome back. There's an old Korean saying, even enemies are tied by red thread if it is fate. Today, we are testing that theory with an assassin and the woman he was sent to kill. Sounds impossible, right? Let's find out.
지안,
Why is the warmth of a man who came to kill me so comforting? Those were her own words, a blade pressed against the back of her neck. And yet the first thing Arya noticed wasn't that. It was the warmth coming from the man's hand. Just 3 hours ago, she never could have imagined a night like this. A narrow alley in Jongno-gu, Seoul. Inside a worn-down antique restoration workshop, Arya had spent nearly a decade turning back the clock on old paintings and ceramic pieces. Her hands were precise and her gaze was sharp. Around the studio, people half joked that she was scarier than the artifacts she worked on. Arya was an American art conservator. Her parents had spent their entire careers as scholars of Korean traditional art, and she'd grown up speaking Korean because of them. As a child, they'd talked to her only in Korean. So to Arya, the language was never just words. It was the sound of her parents' voices, still living somewhere inside it. Even now, 10 years later, something in her throat tightened every time she spoke it. After her parents suddenly vanished in Seoul, she had crossed an ocean to follow whatever traces they'd left behind. That evening, an anonymous client had dropped off a wooden crate at her workbench. The outside was stamped with a seal she couldn't identify. When she broke it open, she found a faded minhwa, a traditional Korean folk painting, mountains, a crane, and a symbol she didn't recognize. This doesn't match the description on the intake form at all. Her hands started shaking before her brain caught up. Strange thing was, this was the first time she'd seen this painting, and yet something about it felt familiar, like something she'd glimpsed on her parents' desk when she was little. It was close to midnight. A single emergency light blinked sleepily in the corner of the workshop. The crate had originally belonged to a criminal organization that laundered money through a front company posing as a Korean fine art auction house. Someone inside had handed it off anonymously to Arya's workshop as evidence of a betrayal. Jian had come that night to retrieve it, with no intention of leaving any witnesses. Not until that night, anyway. Then, without so much as a creak of the window, a shadow slipped into the studio. Who's there? No answer. Something cold pressed against her throat. Arya's breath caught. The workshop light caught only half the man's face. Who gave you that crate? His voice was low and dry, without a single crack. The voice of someone who had done this many times before. I don't know the client's name. Confidentiality is policy. The man Jian shifted his gaze to the minhwa on the workbench. In that moment, the hand gripping the blade loosened, just slightly. Jian's eyes locked onto a small symbol carved into the crane's ankle. He didn't move. It was the same symbol stitched into the corner of his mother's handkerchief, the one he'd carried with him since he was 12. Why is this here? The blade wavered for the first time. And then Jian, without meaning to, looked down at her face. Under the dim light, Arya's eyes were terrified, but bizarrely steady. Even with a blade at her throat, she wasn't looking away. That bothered him. The fact that it bothered him, that it stirred something small and unfamiliar somewhere in his chest, that bothered him even more. Someone with eyes like that. And I'm supposed to kill her. He cut his gaze back to the painting. He was a man who had never once let emotion into the equation. Is there something wrong with that painting? Instead of putting the blade away, Jian picked up the painting. Then he said, low, almost to himself, "Nobody dies in my territory without my permission. Nobody." What he meant was this Jian was a man who recognized no death he hadn't ordered himself. He'd come to eliminate this woman, but in this moment, that order had dissolved inside him. This was his way of saying so. Arya didn't fully understand what he meant, but she understood one thing: she was going to make it through the night. You're coming with me. I've got questions. Light rain had started outside. As Jian wrapped his hand around Arya's wrist, he realized a beat too late that he was holding on with far less force than the situation called for. He spent a long time trying to forget that. Jian's penthouse sat on the 37th floor in the heart of Gangnam. The moment the elevator opened, the first thing Arya felt was the cold. The furniture looked expensive, but there was no warmth in it. Not a single painting on the walls. With a conservator's eye, she could read this space in seconds. Whoever lived here had never learned how to hold on to things. This is a man who's used to throwing things away. Jean led her to the study, spread the minhwa across the desk, and stood there with his arms crossed. Tell me again, where did that painting come from? I already told you. Anonymous client. No name, no contact info. Jian's jaw tensed slightly. He was good at spotting lies, and he could tell she wasn't lying. That was, somehow, the more complicated problem. The first night, Arya tried to sleep on the study sofa. She couldn't. She lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about her parents. The year Arya turned 15, her parents had flown to Seoul for a cultural heritage restoration conference and never come home. The missing persons report went nowhere. The case was closed. What was left, one daughter and a few boxes of research materials. That copy of the minhwa that was in those boxes. It could have been theirs. The thought grazed her mind, and her heart dropped straight to her stomach. The next morning, when Jian walked into the study, Arya was already bent over the minhwa with a magnifying glass. What are you doing? My job. I'm a conservator. Jian didn't respond. He sat down across from her and set 2 mugs of coffee on the desk. Arya looked at the mugs. Jian had already picked up his own and was looking somewhere else. She couldn't tell if it was consideration or just habit. A killer made me coffee. She took a sip before she spoke. You've seen this symbol before. I could tell by the look on your face last night. Jean's hand paused. He looked up at her. She wasn't fearless. He realized she was the kind of person where curiosity arrived before fear did. He filed that away. It was in something my mother left behind. He glanced away the moment the words were out, like he'd surprised himself. It was the first time he'd ever said that to anyone. That afternoon, something strange and reluctant began between them, a kind of partnership. They didn't trust each other, but they were looking at the same painting. Arya analyzed the pigments in the paper. The minhwa dated to the early 1980s, and hidden in the margin, 2 small Chinese characters, Yong-an, the eye of the spirit. But the longer she studied it, the more she noticed something else. The patterns throughout the painting weren't just decoration. The ridge of the mountain, the direction of the crane's flight, the arrangement of the clouds. Arya's fingers stopped moving. This is a map. What? It's not just a painting. Someone hid the location of evidence inside it, encoded in the imagery. Only a conservator would know how to read it. Something shifted in Jian's eyes. Arya kept going. Whoever made this knew that one day, a conservator would look at this painting. They built it to be found. By the right person. Silence. Something in Arya's mind was slowly clicking into place. Her parents' last message to their daughter, a restorer. The thought passed through her, and her fingertips went cold. Mom, Dad, you made this. You left it for me. Jean pulled an old photograph from a drawer. A childhood photo. A young boy. And beside him, a woman, a small tattoo on her wrist. A crane. And the symbol on its ankle. My mother disappeared when I was 12. They called it an accident. I never believed it. Not once. Arya took the photo. Her breath stopped. She knew that face. It had been in one of her parents' research photos, standing at the far end of a group shot. I know her. She was in Mom's files. She couldn't put the photo down. Something enormous was beginning to take shape at the edges of all this. As the night deepened, the space between them quietly shrank. Not the physical distance, the border between them. Arya held a UV lamp up to the margin of the minhwa, and hidden text began to surface. Jean leaned in instinctively. Their shoulders touched. Neither of them moved. 1 second. 2. Can you read it? Seoul. And 2 names. Arya's voice cut out. The second name was her mother's. Yin read it aloud. Arya lifted her head and looked at him. Their eyes met head-on. Then Jean's hand moved. Without a word, He laid it over Arya's over the hand, holding the UV lamp. She didn't pull away. That was the problem. What is happening right now? Jian pulled his hand back first. He stood and walked to the window, looked out at the Seoul skyline for a moment, then said quietly, "Starting tomorrow, be careful." "What do you mean?" "There may be someone in here I can't trust." Arya didn't know what that meant. Jen didn't say anything more. It was only much later that she noticed her hand was still warm. The second name on that painting, her mother's name. Arya spent the whole night unable to process it. The next morning, she moved without telling Jian. She went back through her parents' research materials in her head, working in reverse, the way a conservator does. A restorer's job, after all, is to bring back what's been lost. There was something in Mom's files. Seoul. Yong-an. I walked right past it. That thought had barely solidified when the door opened. "You didn't sleep." Arya looked up. Jian was leaning in the doorframe, watching her. There was something faint in his expression, something close to concern. It passed too quickly to be sure. "What exactly does your organization do?" The air shifted. Whatever had been in Jian's eyes closed off. "You don't need to know that." "I do. For me, I do." That afternoon, Arya pulled every file from her parents' research that connected to Seoul and 1983 and spread them across one side of Jian's study. Jean ignored her at first. Then, eventually, he sat down across from her. He started scanning the documents she'd sorted. Somewhere along the way, he started helping. Deep in the pile, they found a faded copy of a contract. The paper had yellowed, and her mother's handwriting crowded the margins. Arya's hand went still. She knew. Mom knew about this. That's why she disappeared. Her heartbeat felt like it was happening inside her skull. She took one slow breath and looked at the signature line at the bottom of the contract. The signature was in Chinese characters. Arya could read it without looking anything up. Next to the name, her mother had written a note in parentheses. Arya didn't read it out loud. It said, "Head of Fine Art Smuggling Operation. Current organization name Young-an. This organization killed my parents." Her hands shook. Papers slid off the desk. She didn't pick them up. Jean leaned forward and picked up the contract from the floor. The moment he saw the signature, his expression went blank. Why is the elder's name on this? Then Jian's phone buzzed. Unknown number. A short text. "We've been made. Moving tonight. K." Jean's eyes hardened. K, a code name only Jian knew inside the organization. Someone who had been planted as the elder's eyes and ears for years, but who had also been quietly feeding information to Jian. That double-edged presence had finally moved. He knew it in his gut. "Arya, get up. Right now." Arya turned around. "You want to protect me? Don't kid yourself. Your organization killed my parents." Jian didn't deny it. He couldn't. "And your mother." Silence. Jian's eyes moved to her. "That woman in the photo, she's in my mother's research files." All three of them were trying to expose Young-an's smuggling operation together. That's why the elder had all three of them erased. Yin was quiet for a long time. He'd always suspected his mother's death was connected to the organization. But seeing it laid out clearly, like this was the first time. "I didn't know." Does that make it okay? It's not an excuse. It's just true. Jean looked down at the contract. The name of the organization he'd inherited was stamped above the order that killed his mother. For the first time, the full weight of that settled into his body. Arya looked at him. She should have hated everything about him. But what she saw on his face was the same thing she carried inside herself. 20 years of loss. The elder was the man who had handed Jian his position and the man who had killed his mother. They sat with that fact together, inside the same silence. 2 hours later, a sound of metal on metal from the emergency stairwell. Jian was already on his feet before the sound registered. The instinct of someone who'd survived a long time. "Get in the room. Now." "What's happening?" "I said get in the room." His voice had dropped low and fast. Before Arya could move, the front door shattered, and men in black poured in. "The elder!" He already knew that Jian and Arya had started digging into Youngun's past. He'd moved to eliminate both of them before the secrets could surface, including Jian, his own man, the organization's boss. Jin faced them alone. Arya watched through the gap in the study door, a man who kept standing even as he bled. A killer, fighting to protect her. Why is he doing this? Why for me? When the fight was over, Jian was slumped against the wall, breathing hard. Arya ran to him and dropped to her knees. His hand shot out and grabbed her shoulder. A reflex, making sure she was still there. And then slowly, he brought his forehead down to rest against hers. No words, just the sound of breathing. His was fast and ragged. Hers gradually slowed to match it. 1 second. 2. 3. He's alive. So am I. Jin lifted his forehead. He didn't meet her eyes. Arya didn't ask. She felt like she already knew. His fingers pressed into her shoulder just once, barely a little tighter.
When a killer and a victim end up sharing the same story, the world stops dividing neatly into guilty and innocent. Jian had just, for the first time, felt the full weight of the sins he'd inherited, not just in his mind, but in his body. And Arya was still sitting inside the warmth of someone she should have hated, not yet understanding why it felt like that. Isn't that just how the heart works? It reaches its conclusions long before the head catches up.
3 days had passed since the night of the attack. Jian's wounds had closed on the surface, but the air inside the penthouse had only gotten heavier. Each of those 3 evenings, Arya had cleaned and dressed his wounds. The first night in silence, the second without making eye contact, the third with hands that had learned the shape of the task. The third evening, Arya was focused on wrapping the bandage when she felt it a gaze. She looked up. Jian was watching her, not looking away, just watching. It was the first time she registered how close their faces actually were. Why are we this close? Arya was the first to look down. Her fingers moved slower than usual as she tucked the bandage end into place. She felt heat creeping up behind her ears, but she was absolutely not going to let that show. Conservators do first aid too? I don't leave broken things alone. Doesn't matter if it's an artifact or a person. Jian didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth moved just barely enough to catch if you were paying attention. He almost smiled. This man almost smiled. Arya pretended not to notice as she finished the bandage. It was easier that way. For both of them. For now. Late that night, Jean's phone rang. One look at the name on the screen, and his face went cold. The Elder. Talk. What came through the speaker wasn't a voice. It was Arya's breathing. Short and fast, the sound of someone swallowing their fear. Only took 2 days to find her. Sloppy, even for you. She'd been taken. Jian had stepped out for a moment, and the Elder hadn't wasted it. Where is she? No rush. You'll need to come yourself. But Jian, there's one condition. The Elder's voice was worn, like old leather. But what it carried was razor sharp. Kill the girl yourself. Do that, and I'll let you keep your seat. Jian arrived at a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of Seoul. The Elder's men were positioned on all sides. In the middle of it all, Arya sat tied to a chair. Her eyes found Jian the moment he walked in. She was scared, but whatever was behind her eyes hadn't gone out yet. You're late. That stopped him cold. The first thing out of the mouth of someone who'd just been kidnapped a complaint. This wasn't a situation for laughing. But something in his chest gave a quiet, involuntary knock. Good, you're here. Now finish it. Right here in front of me. The Elder slid a handgun across the floor toward Jian. Jian looked at it. He didn't reach for it. A long silence. Jian, you got where you are because of me. You haven't forgotten that. I haven't. Then move. 20 years ago, 2 innocent researchers were killed in the name of Young An. And then the Elder's eyes narrowed. I know now that you're the one who signed that order. What does that have to do with anything? Everything. I've spent years carrying crimes from before I ever took this position without knowing a single thing about them. Jian picked up the gun, but the barrel wasn't pointing at Arya. It was pointing at the Elder. I don't want the seat. I don't want the organization. The elders' men moved all at once. Jian was alone. There were more than 10 of them. He knew. He'd known what this choice was going to cost him. Still tied to the chair, Arya shouted, Jian, don't. The odds are terrible. I know. Then why? A gunshot. The metal door at the back of the warehouse blew open from inside. A second shot. A third. The direction was wrong. Someone was coming in from outside. Kay, the one who'd sent the text. He'd spent years embedded as the Elder's informant, all while quietly feeding intelligence to Jian. In this moment, he had finally, completely switched sides. In the chaos, Jean ran to Arya. He cut the ropes and pulled her to her feet. While Kay held the exit open, the two of them pushed through the back of the warehouse. But just as they cleared the iron door, something hit Jian hard in the back. He went down on one knee, still holding Arya's wrist. Jian. He didn't answer. The strength in his hand was slowly draining away. Arya wrapped both of hers around it. She didn't let go. Getting Jin out of that warehouse was pure stubbornness on Arya's part. She hauled a man twice her size over her shoulder and didn't stop. She collapsed with him somewhere in a back alley and checked him over. He was still breathing. Only after she confirmed that did her hands start to shake. You can't die. Not before I've had my say. She already knew that was only half true. Arya pulled Jian's coat closed and took out her phone. Kay had already sent a message. I'll get you somewhere safe. I've been Jean's man for a long time. Being at the Elder's side, that was always for this moment. Arya read it twice. Then she called. A double agent. What Jian had muttered at the window suddenly made complete sense. Jin came to 12 hours later. Strange ceiling above him. Keyboard tapping beside him. Arya. Spread across a laptop screen, organizing something. Her coffee gone cold and forgotten beside her. What are you doing? You're awake? You can keep sleeping. What are you doing? Arya turned the screen toward him. Young Anne's money flow. Smuggling routes. And a scanned original of the 20-year-old contract for hire. A conservator brings back what's been lost. My parents buried the evidence. I dug all of it up. Jean scrolled through it slowly. She'd stayed up all night, working alone, with him completely out of commission. Who is this person? Arya hadn't used guns or authority. She'd used a conservator's tools. Her parents' lifetime of research. The encoded map hidden inside the minwa. Fragments of information. Jian had let slip without realizing she had pieced it all together. The way you match shards of a broken ceramic. Finding the exact point where everything fits. And Kay had been the final piece. He'd been placed inside the Elder's operation 20 years ago, but he had been carrying the torch of Jian's mother's mission since before she was silenced. The last one left standing after 3 people were erased, waiting all these years for exactly this moment. You knew the whole time? That my parents and Jian's mother were on the same side. Kay nodded. He didn't say anything. 20 years lived inside that silence. The completed files were sent simultaneously to 3 places that morning: the Cultural Heritage Administration's Special Investigation Unit, the Korean branch of Interpol, and Young-An's internal group chat. The last one was the killing blow. Crimes the Elder had hidden even from his own people for decades, spilled out all at once, and the organization began to fracture from the inside. You taught me this, that if you want to flip the board, you have to start from inside the game. I never said that. You showed me. Jian didn't answer. The morning light through the window was falling across the side of Arya's face. He let himself look at it for a while. The Elder fell apart from inside his own organization that evening. People who had moved at his word for decades turned their backs on him, one by one, when the truth came out. When investigators arrived, the Elder didn't resist. Old sins collapsed the old-fashioned way. Arya heard the news standing next to Jian. She stared down at the Seoul streets through the window and didn't speak for a long time. Mom, Dad, it's done. One tear. Just one. She wiped it with her sleeve and turned to look at Jian. From now on, I give the orders. You spend the rest of your life making it right here, beside me. Jean looked at her for a moment. Then he spoke, low, barely above a whisper. That's your only condition? Isn't it enough? It's enough. The silence that settled between them wasn't heavy this time. It was the sound of something that had been pulled taut for a long time, finally finding its way back to where it belonged. A few days later, Arya came back to her workshop in Jongno. The unfinished minhwa was still on the workbench where she'd left it. She knew what this painting was now, her parents' final message to their daughter. She picked up her brush, working a single faded feather on the crane back to life, and for the first time, she could look at the painting without crying. The workshop door opened. It was Jian, 2 cups of coffee in one hand. When are you going to stop walking into my workshop without knocking? I'm not planning on it. Jian pulled a chair up next to her, set down one of the coffees, and studied the minhwa. Can you fix all of it? There's nothing that can't be fixed. It just takes time. A beat of quiet. Then Jian reached out and stilled her brush. His hand closed gently around her wrist. Arya looked up. He said her name for the first time, in Korean. Arya. Her breath stopped. She had never heard her own name sound like this before. It was close to the way her parents used to say it when she was small. Something in her throat pulled tight. Jan didn't say anything after that. He didn't have to. Arya understood what was inside it. I'm sorry. Thank you. And one thing more. This man. Arya set her brush down. She laid her hand over his. She was the one who moved first this time. Afternoon light slanted down through the narrow alley of Jongno. The workshop was quiet. Where the sound of the brush had been, there was only the sound of 2 people breathing.
This story of a killer and a conservator carrying the same loose into the same fight was, in the end, a story about how people restore each other. If there are hands that refuse to let go of broken things, there is nothing in this world that cannot be healed. This is what these two found in each other.
This story is a work of fiction,